Okay, folks, this is going to be an in memoriam review. I actually watched this movie prior to his passing like a month ago, and I have watched it before, but we're going to get around to reviewing it now, and this is a review dedicated to Val Kilmer. Heat, 1995, directed by Michael Mann, and you know I love Michael Mann, especially his early 80s film Thief, which I have reviewed here on the channel. It is a masterpiece. This movie, to me, it's not as good visually as Thief, which is why I think my review is what it is. I'm going to get it right out of the way. This, to me, is a 4 out of 5 film. It is a 90s classic, do not get me wrong. But visually and soundtrack-wise, I much prefer the neo-noir style of his film Thief, as well as the Tangerine Dream soundtrack, compared to this 1990s crime thriller drama. It is a classic. It is a favorite. I obviously have owned it for a long time. I remember first watching this movie with my buddy Vince Ochoa. Huge shout out when I was in Bible college. I remember watching with him, I believe, at his aunt's house in Temecula, circa 2009. That is the first time that I remember seeing this film. And this is the second time that I have rewatched it since then. This movie is quite long, comes in at 2 hours and 50 minutes long. I would have been 8 years old when this movie came out. And the script for this movie, and this is why I love watching movies and then reviewing them and finding out all the stuff that I had no idea, the backstory that goes into this picture. The script for this movie, so I think Thief came out around 1980 or 81. I'm not specifically sure, and I didn't write a note on it. But he wrote this script actually before Thief. He wrote this script in 1979. And then he was shopping it around in the 80s. It wasn't coming to pass. He tried to give it to Walter Hill. I've directed some of his movies. I've reviewed some of his films here on the channel. But it wasn't coming to fruition. And then he worked the script up into a TV pilot. So there is a 90-minute made-for-TV movie that came out in 1989 based off of his original script. That movie is called L.A. Takedown. And the network did not pick up the 90-minute pilot and turn it into a television series. So then he ended up finally, all these years later, reworking his script into a full-length feature film. Now, I didn't know this movie was based on a true story, inspired by true events, as it were. So there was this famous Chicago PD detective / officer, a guy by the name of Chuck Adamson, and he's actually famous in his own right. He worked for decades as a Chicago PD officer, and he had a lot of great stories. This film is based off one of his most famous cases where a real-life guy that's played by the Robert De Niro character, whose character's name is Neil McCauley, they're committing this huge bank heist, kind of like in the movie Thief. This is another bank heist movie, so they're kind of tied together. I feel like you need to watch Thief, you need to watch this movie back-to-back because they kind of fit together in a similar genre, although I think visually and soundtrack wise Thief is the superior film for me, like I mentioned earlier. But this is based off of a 1964 case, and Mann wrote the character in the inspiration of an Alain Delon's character from a 1967 French neo-noir crime thriller called Les Samurai. I'll have to check that one out. So that character is kind of this loner, but it's based off this real life character that was a felon from Alcatraz, and he had a whole crew that he ran with, and in 1964 they were going to do a bank heist. I had no idea. The movie had a $60 million budget and it was very successful. It would go on to gross $187 million at the box office, mostly because you see a pairing of Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. It was a big deal. And then you also got Val Kilmer in this movie. What's the guy? Danny Trejo is phenomenal. I think this is one of his best roles. Obviously, we know him from like Machete character, but Danny Trejo is excellent in this film. Standout performance from Danny Trejo. Jon Voight's in this movie. But I love it. It's a cat and mouse movie, right? So Al Pacino is playing the LAPD police detective. The original story took place in Chicagoland, but then for whatever reason they made this film take place in Los Angeles, and it's just ultra violent. Young Natalie Portman is in this movie. A lot of profanity, rated R, definitely not suitable for children. Have them leave the room immediately. And you see a real life portrayal of a police officer that is very neglectful, 3 failed marriages, I think, and he's just so dedicated to the craft of being a police detective and finding the bad guys, as he's pursuing the Robert De Niro character. And it's just a masterpiece, right? I don't know why I'm not 5 out of 5. Like, I should be, but visually and soundtrack wise, it just didn't push me to the point where I was going to be a 5 out of 5, but it's still a must own and a must watch. Interesting, Rotten Tomato critic average is 83%. Audience score with over 200,000 reporting in, 94%, and IMDb, very high score for them, 8.3 out of 10. And like I mentioned, massively successful at the box office. Very sad that Val Kilmer is no longer with us. He was one of the greats. Check it out if you haven't seen it. I'd love your comments down below if you can suffer through my insufferable ramblings. But there's definitely something to be said about researching a movie and finding out what went into making a movie. And, you know, this is over 15 years in the making, essentially, before we get the finished product, which would become this 1990s classic. So that's my review, 4 out of 5 on Heat. Rest in peace, Val Kilmer. May your memory be eternal.